What if the person you trusted most, the one you waved to every morning, was hiding the darkest secret of all? When 26-year-old Marissa Grayson vanished without a trace, the small town of Fairhaven was left spinning. But the truth would be more chilling than anyone could imagine, and it would all unravel with a single strand of DNA. Marissa Grayson was the kind of woman you couldn't help but notice, but not because she demanded attention. She was subtle, graceful, with a smile that could light up even the coldest New England morning. Newly divorced, raising her 4-year-old daughter, Sophie, Marissa had recently moved into a quiet cul-de-sac on the outskirts of Fairhaven. A cozy little cluster of brick houses where everyone knew everyone's name. Neighbors brought casseroles, kids played hopscotch on the sidewalks, barbecues and block parties filled the summer months. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. One of those smiling neighbors was David Leary, a 42-year-old handyman who lived 2 houses down. He was known for mowing elderly neighbors' lawns, fixing broken fences, and rescuing runaway dogs. Everyone trusted David. Some even depended on him. If you needed a smoke detector installed, a swing set repaired, or a deadbolt changed, David was your man. Marissa had met him her first week in the neighborhood. David had offered to help carry a heavy dresser into her new house. He smiled warmly, called her Miss Marissa, and charmed little Sophie by making balloon animals out of long, twisted-up party balloons. It seemed innocent. It seemed safe. But behind David's easy smile, something dark was festering. Something that no one, not even Marissa, could see. Until it was too late. It was a warm spring evening when Marissa disappeared. April 18th. The day had been ordinary. Daycare drop-off, grocery shopping, texting back and forth with her sister about upcoming plans for Easter. That evening, she'd FaceTimed her best friend while making spaghetti for Sophie. She'd laughed. She'd promised to call back later. She never did. Around 8:15 p.m., a neighbor walking her dog noticed Marissa's front door slightly ajar. She thought little of it at first. Maybe Marissa had just stepped outside to bring in groceries or chat with someone. But by morning, it was clear something was wrong. The spaghetti pot still sat on the stove. Marissa's phone, wallet, and keys were on the kitchen counter. Her car was in the driveway. And most chilling of all, little Sophie was found asleep upstairs, unharmed, completely unaware that her mother was missing. The Fairhaven police were called in immediately. At first, they treated it as a possible runaway case. Maybe Marissa had gotten overwhelmed. Being a single mom wasn't easy. But her family insisted. She would never leave Sophie behind. Not willingly. A search party was organized. Volunteers combed the woods. Flyers went up on telephone poles and convenience store windows. But there was no sign of Marissa Grayson. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. At first, the people of Fairhaven rallied around the Graysons. They lit candles on Marissa's porch. They delivered hot meals to her family. They organized prayer circles and Bring Marissa Home, fundraisers. But as the days turned into weeks and still no sign of her surfaced, the tone began to shift. Whispers crept along the cul-de-sac like fog. Maybe she ran off with someone. Maybe she wasn't as perfect as she seemed. No body, no crime, right? Marissa's ex-husband, Tyler, became a target almost immediately. He had been bitter about the divorce. Everyone knew that. Some said he still carried a torch for her. Others claimed he hated her new independence. The police brought him in for questioning within days. He sat stiff-backed in the interview room, answering every question with flat, rehearsed honesty. Yes, he'd argued with Marissa about custody. No, he hadn't seen her the night she disappeared. Yes, he had an alibi. His new girlfriend, Kara, confirmed he'd been at her apartment all night. Still, the rumors persisted. Tyler couldn't show his face at the gas station or grocery store without feeling the weight of 100 suspicious eyes. It didn't matter that he passed a polygraph. It didn't matter that his phone records backed him up. In Fairhaven, guilt wasn't determined by evidence. It was determined by gossip. Meanwhile, David Leary offered his help to the search parties. He handed out water bottles. He helped hang flyers. He even offered to fix the broken lock on Marissa's front door so her family wouldn't have to. Everyone praised him for his selflessness. Such a good neighbor, they said. Such a kind soul. No one noticed the small things. The way David avoided Marissa's backyard during searches. The way he always found something else to do when they combed the woods behind her house. And no one questioned why David, of all people, seemed to know exactly how to comfort Marissa's terrified daughter Sophie, distracting her with magic tricks and silly faces when she asked for her mommy. The police barely glanced his way. After all, monsters didn't wear friendly smiles. Did they? 41 days after Marissa's disappearance, the police received a tip. A hiker had stumbled across something deep in the Fairhaven woods, a shallow grave, hastily covered with branches and leaves. Inside was the body of a woman, badly decomposed, but still wearing a tattered hoodie that Marissa's family immediately recognized. The case shifted overnight from a missing person investigation to a homicide. The town of Fairhaven recoiled in horror. The sweet, smiling young mother wasn't just missing. She was dead, and someone had put her there. But who? Detectives pored over the gravesite. They combed Marissa's house again, this time with fresh urgency. They re-interviewed neighbors, friends, and coworkers. Still, no solid leads, until the forensic results came back. And with it, a piece of evidence so small it was almost overlooked, but powerful enough to change everything. A single strand of hair, clinging to Marissa's sweatshirt. It wasn't hers. And when the DNA results came back, it matched one person. David Leary, the good neighbor, the handyman, the man who had cried at the prayer circles and handed out water bottles, the wolf in sheep's clothing. May 30th, exactly 42 days since Marissa Grayson vanished, the Fairhaven Police Department made their move. David Leary was arrested outside his modest brick home without incident. No sirens, no yelling. Just two detectives in plain clothes and a pair of steel handcuffs glinting in the afternoon sun. Neighbors watched from behind curtains and screen doors, mouths agape. David, the handyman? The guy who mowed their lawns and fixed their kids' bikes? The man who had hugged Sophie while her mother lay buried in the woods? It was unthinkable. And yet it was happening, right before their eyes. The sheriff held a press conference later that evening. "We have probable cause to charge David Leary with the murder of Marissa Grayson," he announced grimly. "Evidence collected at the scene, as well as forensic analysis, link him directly to the crime." The reporters exploded with questions. How long had they suspected him? Was Marissa assaulted before she died? Had David confessed? The sheriff refused to answer. He didn't have to, because inside the Fairhaven interrogation room, the real story was unfolding. And it was darker than anyone could have imagined. David sat slouched in the metal chair, eyes bloodshot, hands cuffed to a metal ring bolted to the table. For the first few hours, he insisted on his innocence. "I didn't kill her," he said again and again. "I just found her. She was all ready." But the detectives pressed harder. They showed him the DNA report. They played back surveillance footage showing his truck driving near Marissa's house the night she vanished, footage he had claimed didn't exist. They laid out every lie he had told. Piece by piece, they dismantled the good neighbor facade he had spent years perfecting. And slowly, David began to crack. At 2:13 a.m., after nearly 9 hours of questioning, he broke down completely. Through ragged sobs, he told them everything. The obsession had started months earlier. A slow, sick infatuation that David fed in secret. He would watch Marissa from his window. He would offer to fix things that weren't broken just to be near her. He would find excuses to bump into her at the mailbox, the grocery store, the daycare. He convinced himself she liked the attention. He convinced himself that she wanted him. She just didn't know it yet. On the night of April 18th, David had seen Marissa working in her front yard as the sun dipped below the trees. She smiled at him. Just a casual, neighborly smile. But to David, it meant something more. Something dangerous. Later that night, after Sophie was tucked into bed, David slipped out of his house, dressed in dark clothes. He crept across the yards like a shadow, carrying duct tape, rope, and a hunting knife tucked into his waistband. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do. Not really. But he knew he couldn't watch her live without him any longer. David admitted he forced his way into Marissa's house through the back door. She screamed when she saw him, fought, bit, scratched. But David was bigger, stronger, fueled by months of pent-up obsession. He tied her wrists, he gagged her, and when she still tried to resist, he panicked. He pressed the duct tape over her mouth too tightly. He wrapped the rope around her chest too tightly. Marissa fought until she couldn't anymore, until her breath rattled out in one last desperate cry, and then stopped. David didn't know what to do with the body. He sat on her kitchen floor for hours, rocking back and forth, murmuring apologies that no one could hear. Finally, just before dawn, he wrapped Marissa's lifeless body in an old tarp from his garage and drove her deep into the woods. He dug a shallow grave with his bare hands. He left her there like discarded trash. And then he went home, showered, shaved, and helped hang flyers with her face on them. Fairhaven would never be the same. The discovery of Marissa's body had shattered the town's sense of safety, but the revelation that it was David Leary, the man they trusted, the man who had fixed their children's swings, that truly poisoned the air. For weeks after the arrest, the cul-de-sac remained eerily silent. No children played in the streets, No cookouts were held. Instead, people crossed the street to avoid walking past David's empty house. They tore down the swings he had repaired. They threw away the tools he had lent them. It was as if, by erasing every trace of him, they could somehow scrub the horror from their memories. But it didn't work. Fairhaven's innocence was gone, and it wasn't coming back. Marissa's mother, Evelyn, stood at her daughter's grave on a gray June morning, clutching Sophie's small hand. The little girl didn't fully understand why her mommy wasn't coming back. She asked if they could leave flowers for her to find when she wakes up. Evelyn smiled through her tears and nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. Mommy will see them." In private, though, Evelyn was drowning. She blamed herself for encouraging Marissa to buy the house. She blamed herself for not sensing something was wrong sooner. She blamed herself for believing the world was safer than it was. In interviews, Evelyn's voice would tremble as she spoke about her daughter. "She was light," she said once, wiping tears from her cheeks. "She was light," and he snuffed her out. Tyler, Marissa's ex-husband, also fell into a spiral of guilt and anger. Even though they had divorced bitterly, he still loved her, in his own complicated way. He still pictured her laugh when he closed his eyes. At the funeral, he held Sophie so tightly that she squirmed, whispering, "Daddy, you're squeezing me too hard." He couldn't help it. The fear of losing her too was now a constant gnawing presence in his chest. In the county jail, David Leary sat in his cell and waited. His once cheerful face sagged with exhaustion and fear. His hands shook constantly, a side effect of the anxiety medication prescribed after his arrest. David spoke with a court-appointed therapist once a week. The sessions were mandatory, but mostly useless. When asked if he regretted killing Marissa, David's answers were chilling. "I regret getting caught," he said once, without flinching. "I regret that I didn't do it differently. I just wanted her to love me. That's all." The therapist noted the signs of narcissistic delusion. David didn't see Marissa as a person. She was an object he felt entitled to. And when she didn't reciprocate the fantasy he had built in his head, he destroyed her. Not out of hatred, but out of a twisted, desperate kind of love. Everywhere you went in Fairhaven, you could feel the weight of Marissa's loss. At Sophie's daycare, there was a framed photo of Marissa next to the check-in desk, with a tiny plaque that read, "In memory of our brightest star." At the grocery store, a bouquet of sunflowers, Marissa's favorite, sat by the door with a handwritten sign, "For Marissa, always smiling, always remembered." People spoke about her in hushed tones, as if louder voices might break the fragile thread holding them together. And in the quiet moments, late at night, when the streetlights buzzed and the wind rustled the empty swings, Fairhaven residents asked themselves the question that would haunt them forever. The trial of David Leary opened on October 3rd, nearly 6 months after Marissa Grayson's body was discovered. By sunrise, news vans lined the streets of Fairhaven. Reporters clutched microphones, whispering into cameras about the monster next door and the murder that shattered a community. Inside the courthouse, every seat was filled. Marissa's family sat in the front row, clutching tissues, faces pale with exhaustion and grief. Tyler sat stiffly beside them, a protective hand resting on Sophie's shoulder. David, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, shuffled into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles shackled. He wouldn't look at the Graysons. He kept his eyes glued to the defense table. But Marissa's mother never looked away from him. She wanted him to feel her stare. She wanted him to know she saw him for what he truly was. Not a neighbor, not a handyman, not a friend, a murderer. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented the DNA evidence, the strand of David's hair embedded in Marissa's clothing. They showed the GPS data from David's truck, tracing his movements from his home to Marissa's and then out to the woods. They played the chilling interrogation tapes, where David confessed, his voice trembling but unmistakable. The jury listened in horrified silence. Photos of the crime scene, the shallow grave, the tarp, the duct tape were shown on large screens. Some jurors wept openly. Others stared at their hands, unable to meet the images head-on. The defense tried to argue that David was mentally ill, that he had not intended to kill Marissa. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the brutality too obvious. The prosecutor, a steely-eyed woman named Jessica Miles, summed it up in her closing argument. David Leary did not suffer a break with reality. He made choice after choice after choice. He chose to stalk Marissa. He chose to invade her home. He chose to bind her, silence her, and ultimately end her life. And for those choices, he must be held accountable. It took the jury only 4 hours to reach a decision. Guilty, on all counts, first-degree murder, kidnapping, breaking and entering. David showed no emotion as the verdict was read aloud. No tears, no pleading. Just the same vacant stare he had worn since the night of his arrest. Judge Eleanor Reed addressed him directly before sentencing. You stole a mother from her daughter. You stole a daughter from her mother. You stole the future from an entire family. There is no redemption for what you have done. She sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David was led away without a word, and for the first time since Marissa's disappearance, her family allowed themselves to breathe, even if only a little. After the sentencing, Marissa's mother stood on the courthouse steps and addressed the crowd of reporters. Today, justice was served. But justice doesn't bring Marissa back. Justice doesn't erase the nightmares. Justice doesn't fill the empty seat at our Thanksgiving table. She held up Sophie's small hand. This is who matters now. We will raise her to know her mother's light. We will not let that monster's darkness define her life. The town of Fairhaven slowly, painfully began to heal. They planted a memorial garden in Marissa's honor at the local park, a place where Sophie could run and laugh and remember her mother's love. But the scars remained, in every locked door, in every wary glance at a neighbor, in every mother who clutched her child a little tighter at night. Some wounds, they realized, never truly heal. They just stop bleeding. When tragedy strikes, it often leaves behind an echo, a haunting question that refuses to be answered. How well do you really know the people around you? Fairhaven thought they knew David Leary. They waved to him from their porches. They trusted him with their children. They let him into their homes and into their lives. But behind the easy smile and neighborly gestures was a darkness they never saw coming. A darkness that stole a young mother's future and left a little girl without the most important person in her world. Marissa Grayson's story reminds us that evil doesn't always wear a villain's mask. Sometimes it looks just like everyone else. Sometimes it lives next door. And sometimes it's only when the unthinkable happens that the mask finally slips. Today, Sophie Grayson grows up with the strength of a mother's memory, but without her mother's arms to hold her. David Leary spends every hour of every day in a cold, gray prison cell, left with nothing but his own monstrous reflection. Fairhaven, once a picture-perfect town, now carries the silent, invisible scars of betrayal. And for all of us watching from the outside, the lesson remains painfully clear. Trust is precious, and it can be deadly when given to the wrong person. What do you think? Was there a moment someone could have stopped this tragedy before it happened? Was there a sign that everyone missed? We want to hear your thoughts. Comment below, share your own stories, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they live next door.